England in the second half of the 16th century. At the helm of power was a woman who became the symbol of an entire era. Elizabeth Tudor, the Virgin Queen. Her crown was not just an ornament, but a shield against the entire world. Her court was a brilliant phoenix, risen from the ashes of religious strife. But every light casts a shadow. We know the names of her favorites: Leicester, Essex, Raleigh, men for whom the fight for the Queen's attention was a battle for global dominance. But here is a hidden truth the history books were slow to record. While these men fought for a place at the foot of the throne, real power was often found in quiet chambers, in whispers after midnight. And one woman, neither queen nor princess, perfected this art. She wore no crown, but her influence reached so far that the hearts of the noblest lords stilled under her gaze. Her name was Lady Reilly, and this is the story of how the Queen's favorite became the shadow on the throne. Now let's go back. England, the mid-16th century. This is not the glittering palace of Elizabeth. This is a nation torn in two by religious war. On the throne is Mary Tudor, called Bloody Mary by her people. Her reign is one of pyres burning with Protestants, and a fear that seeped into every crack, every heart. And at the very eye of this storm is a young Princess Elizabeth, the Queen's sister, the main claimant to the throne, and the most important prisoner. Into this darkness came a ray of light, or rather a shadow bearing life-saving knowledge. Sir Nicholas Throckmorton, a diplomat, a cunning courtier, and, most importantly, a supporter of the Protestant faith. He risked everything. His head, his fortune, his family, to secretly warn Elizabeth of new accusations, of a plot being woven against her. He gave her a weapon, information, and she survived. But let us step inside the Throckmorton home. Picture a young girl with intelligent, watchful eyes. This is Elizabeth Throckmorton, Sir Nicholas's niece. She didn't just listen to her uncle's tales of court and danger by the fireside. She absorbed them like a sponge. She saw how words could be sharper than a dagger, and an intercepted letter worth more than a regiment of soldiers. She learned to read between the lines, to see true intentions behind masks of flattery. This house was her first academy of survival and power. 8 years passed. Elizabeth ascended to the throne, and for the Throckmorton family, whose loyalty had been proven in the darkest of times, every door swung open. The young Elizabeth Throckmorton arrived at court as a lady-in-waiting. What, after all, is a lady-in-waiting? An ornament, a companion, an accessory to the royal wardrobe. This is a misconception. The ladies-in-waiting were the lifeblood flowing through the veins of the palace. They were the ears, catching every whisper in the alcoves. They were the eyes, noting who blushed at whose name. They were the hands that delivered letters, adjusted the folds of a gown, and could discreetly slip a note from its hiding place. The court was a giant, glittering clock, and the ladies-in-waiting were the tiny, yet absolutely essential, cogs within it. And among these cogs, Elizabeth Throckmorton quickly became the most precise and reliable. She did not try to outshine others with her beauty. She was not a gossip. Her weapons were her discretion and her intellect. She understood the Queen's deepest longing, a craving for sincerity in an ocean of flattery. And so, she became for Elizabeth someone to talk to, not as a queen, but as a woman. She was a living diary that would never tell its secrets, a confessor who offered not absolution, but the priceless currency of trust. And that was the true currency of the court. Not lands, not titles, the trust of the monarch. And so, brick by brick, day by day, through late-night conversations, through well-timed advice, through expertly kept secrets, Elizabeth Throckmorton built her invisible ladder. A ladder that led not to the throne itself, but to what was more powerful than the throne, to the space in its shadow. And she was ready to climb it to the very peak of power, while remaining, to all the world, merely a shadow in the mirror behind the Queen. And then, into this carefully constructed, almost ritualistic world of the Queen's court, he stormed in like a hurricane from the Atlantic. Walter Raleigh. He was not merely a courtier. He was the embodiment of a new, daring England, a navigator, poet, soldier, and adventurer. He brought with him not gossip, but the scent of the ocean wind, salt spray on his boots, and tales of unseen lands beyond the sea. He was a living dream, the incarnation of a world far larger than the palace walls. His rise to fame was dazzling and swift. The queen, whose life was bound by strict ceremony, was captivated by his rough charm and wild imagination. He named new lands in her honor, Virginia, the land of the Virgin. He read her poems comparing her to a goddess. He was the fire at which she, forever freezing in the icy loneliness of power, longed to warm herself. And where was our heroine during this time? Lady Elizabeth Throckmorton, now one of the most trusted ladies-in-waiting, did not watch his ascent from the sidelines. She was at the very center of it all, and a spark flew between her and the brilliant favorite. What was it? A flash of passion between two of the court's most dazzling personalities? Or the instant recognition of two predators who saw in each other a kindred spirit and the perfect ally in the great game? Imagine these encounters. He, smelling of tobacco and the sea, a rough-hewn genius. She, the perfect court lady, with a mind sharper than a honed sword. They spoke not only of love. They spoke of politics, ships, money, and conspiracies. He saw in her not just an ornament, but a strategist. She saw in him not just a favorite, but a man of action, capable of turning her ambitions into reality. Their alliance, first a secret intellectual bond and then a romantic one, was a bomb, its clockwork ticking at the very heart of the court. And then, the unthinkable happened. The one thing that could not stay hidden. Lady Reilly discovered she was with child. A pregnancy for a lady-in-waiting was a scandal. A pregnancy for the Queen's favorite was an act of treason. It was a challenge thrown directly in the face of the Virgin Queen. For Elizabeth, this was not merely a breach of etiquette. It was a personal betrayal of double strength. The man she had raised up, and the woman she had trusted, had united against her, against the very image of the Eternal Virgin. They married in secret. Did they hope for the Queen's forgiveness? Or were they simply defying her? The answer was immediate. Elizabeth's wrath was terrible. It was not the cold anger of the law, but the scorching rage of a woman betrayed. "My dog and my servant have dared," she likely screamed. And the thunderclap came. Both Sir Walter and Lady Elizabeth Reilly were sent to the Tower of London on the Queen's order. It seemed to be the end. The dazzling career of the favorite and the meteoric rise of the confidant had ended in a stone cage. But there was one thing they did not know. For Lady Reilly, imprisonment in the tower was not the end of the game. It was merely a change of scenery. Her true battle for power was only just beginning, and she would wage it not from the throne room, but from behind a prison grate. The end of the 16th century. A stone cage, the Tower of London. For most, this meant the end. A broken fate, a ruined name, oblivion. But Lady Reilly was not like most. The tower did not break her. It became her new fortress, her new arena, while her husband, Sir Walter, paced his cell, dreaming up new, mad plans for expeditions. She conducted herself differently. With a cold, almost chilling clarity, she began to turn her prison into a command center. Her first task was to establish channels of communication. Were the jailers bribed with her remaining funds, or charmed by her resilience? Servants, smuggling notes in the folds of their clothes? The widows of guards, coming for charity and leaving with bundles of letters? She spun a web with her cell at its very center. Every strand vibrated, carrying news from the outside world to her. And that news was explosive. The court, having lost the dazzling Reilly, had found a new idol. The young, hot-headed, and ambitious Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex. His rise to favor was brilliant, but it was also blinding and dangerous. And from her cell, Lady Reilly saw it perfectly. She saw how his arrogance alienated the old nobility, how his reckless spending drained the treasury, how his failed military campaigns cast a shadow over England. It was then that her secret network sprang to life. She became the invisible puppet master for the most powerful opposition. To her, in the Tower, came those whom Essex had humiliated, those irritated by his power, those who feared his growing influence. Her cell became a place of pilgrimage for the aggrieved and the ambitious. She did not give orders. She gave counsel. She connected the right people. She whispered, and that whisper echoed through the corridors of power. She masterfully pitted her enemies against each other, using Essex as a battering ram against some, while turning others against him. And she knew everything. She knew of his secret negotiations with the crown's enemies. She knew of his plans to storm the palace. She knew of his desperate, mad attempt to raise a rebellion in London. And when Essex's forces fled, and he himself was arrested and imprisoned within the very same fortress, Lady Reilly could feel a bitter satisfaction. Her greatest rival, the man who had taken her place in the Queen's heart, now shared her fate. Essex was beheaded on Tower Green. For many, this was a triumph of royal power. But for those in the know, the shadow of Lady Reilly loomed over the event. She did not pull the trigger, but she had created the atmosphere in which his plot could form, and his failure was all but assured. After Essex's execution, the fear of her reached its peak. Now the court was afraid not only of the Queen's wrath, but of the all-seeing eye of her former favorite, a woman who, even imprisoned, could shape the kingdom's destiny. And so, from the damp gloom of her dungeon, she honed her most formidable weapon, her reputation. The reputation of an elusive spider, whose web was invisible yet unbreakably strong. She proved that a true prison is not made of stone walls, but of ignorance. And she was free. As long as she knew more than anyone else, it was she, not her jailers, who held the entire Elizabethan court hostage. The century was drawing to a close, and with it Elizabeth herself was fading. Her once iron will had been worn down by years, by the loss of those close to her, and by the silent, unspoken pain of betrayals. The court, that brilliantly polished machine, began to falter. The whispers grew louder. The most crucial, most dangerous question hung in the stifling air of the dying Queen's chambers. What comes next? The matter of succession was a weight hanging from the neck of every courtier. The Queen refused to name an heir. It was her final taboo, the last shred of power she would not release from her weakening grasp. And around her sickbed, a shadow war had already begun. Who would inherit the throne? The Spanish Infanta? Or James of Scotland, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots? England stood on the brink of civil war. And in this mounting panic, the gaze of the most powerful man in the kingdom after Elizabeth, Robert Cecil, turned toward the Tower. Not to Walter Raleigh, the rebellious romantic, but to his wife. Why? Because Lady Reilly, even in confinement, possessed what Cecil did not: a direct and trusted channel to the Scottish court. For years, her husband had been in secret correspondence with King James VI, pledging his support. And who better than his clever wife to be the keeper of those connections and the archivist of those promises? And so, the unthinkable happened. A secret pilgrimage began to Lady Reilly, a state criminal. Not from rebellious aristocrats, but from the crown's own ministers. Cecil and his men came to her as if to an oracle. They slipped into her cell under cover of darkness, their faces hidden by cloaks. They asked, "What does he want? Can he be trusted? What are his terms?" And she, the spider at the center of the web, pulled the strings that led all the way to Edinburgh. Elizabeth died, never having named a successor aloud. But the mechanism for the transfer of power was already in motion. Set in motion by Cecil's hand, yet following blueprints that had been drawn up within Lady Reilly's cell. She had facilitated the dialogue. She had helped clear the path. The peaceful transition of the crown from the Tudors to the Stuarts became the greatest achievement of her reign, a reign from the shadows. This was her finest hour, her ultimate irony. A victim of the system had ensured its smooth operation after the death of its founder. One of the first acts of the new King James was to free the Raleigh family. The gates of the Tower swung open for them. They walked out into freedom. But what kind of freedom was it? For Walter, it was a chance to plunge back into adventure, a path that would ultimately lead him to the block. But for her, it was the official recognition of her power. The shadow had finally taken form. She emerged from the dungeon not as a broken prisoner, but as one of the most influential and well-informed women in England, a woman who had single-handedly weathered the storm of a dying era and helped a new one be born. Her greatest intrigue was not against someone, but for something for the future. She did not pull the trigger, but she had loaded the gun that determined the nation's fate. The final secret of the dying Queen Elizabeth was this. The key to her legacy had not been held in her own hands, but in the hands of the woman she had once cursed and imprisoned, yet without whom she could not have left this world in peace. The shadow on the throne had proven more enduring than the throne itself. So who was Lady Reilly? A villainous genius or a victim of circumstance? A calculating schemer or a woman who defied the system for love? She was a product of her time, brutal, brilliant, and merciless. She proved that a crown is not just gold and rubies. It is knowledge. It is access. It is the skill to survive the storm and emerge not broken, but stronger. She did not rule England from the throne room. She ruled from the private chamber, from the prison cell, from the salon where rumors were born. She was the shadow without which the very light of the Elizabethan age could not have existed. Her name was erased from the official records, but it is forever inscribed in the secret history of power. A history where the true kings and queens do not always wear crowns. Thank you for being with us. To uncover more secrets of history, be sure to subscribe. Until we meet again in the labyrinth of the past.